Thank you very much, first of all, to all the panelists for agreeing to be on this panel today. I'd like to take a moment to introduce all of the people that are on the panel, and then we'll go through and have a little discussion about the background of the panelists. We welcome questions. You can put your questions in the comments section, and after we take a small break, we'll be able to respond to those questions. And so let me introduce all of our panelists in no particular order, beginning with Sharen Lau. Sharen Lau is legal counsel at BASF Canada Inc. In Toronto, if I'm not mistaken. And Sharen originally practiced in Hong Kong. We also have Lua Ebrahimi, who is an associate at Whaley Estate Litigation Partners. And prior to her practicing in Canada, she was practicing estate law in South Africa. We also have Siobhan Lennox, who is currently an associate at O'Neill Law LLP in BC. And Siobhan is also the president of Global Lawyers Canada, the BC chapter. And prior to moving to Canada, Siobhan practiced in the UK. And we have Ugo Mackenzie. And Ugo Mackenzie recently qualified in Ontario, if I'm not mistaken. And she's a member at large of the Canadian Bar Association. She's also a council member of the Ontario Bar Association. And Ugo originally practiced in Nigeria. So welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for agreeing to be part of this panel. I'm very excited to be hosting this first panel discussion in a series of 3 panels that we have planned for this month. We have another session planned for November 16th and a 3rd session planned for November 23rd. And we're still looking for some panelists. So if any of you watching are interested in becoming a panelist, please send me an email, Liran at LexPD.ca. That's Liran at LexPD.ca. So if any of you would like to begin, perhaps Sharen, can we begin with you? And maybe Sharen, you can just introduce yourself, tell us, where you started practicing, what areas of law you've been practicing, and what did you do before you came to Canada, and what are you doing now in Canada?
Sure. Great to be here. It's lovely to meet everyone on the panel. And just to give everyone an introduction, I was actually born and raised in Toronto, but I schooled in Toronto, Hong Kong, and the UK, and I graduated with an LLB in the UK. I went to the University of Kent there. I started my legal career in Hong Kong after grad, and then I qualified in Hong Kong in 2009. Worked there for 6 years as a litigator at international and independent firms before I returned to Toronto in 2015. I practiced medical malpractice. I worked in medical malpractice claims. I was defending medical professionals and hospitals in Hong Kong. And then upon returning to Toronto, I qualified in Ontario in 2018. I joined BASF Canada as an articling student. In 2017, finished articling, qualified in 2018. And now I practice in corporate and commercial law at BASF Canada. It's a global chemical manufacturer. I'm lead counsel there for business development teams and company affiliates and some business units. And I also take part there as a council member or a volunteer in company-wide diversity and inclusion initiatives.
Thank you so much, Sharen, for sharing that experience. And what I'm trying to highlight today, or hoping to highlight, excuse me. is the vast experience that internationally trained lawyers have. And perhaps Siobhan can go next and speak a little bit about yourself. You know, where did you go to law school, and what areas did you practice in, and what are you doing today?
Sure. Thanks very much for having me today, Liran. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is Siobhan Lennox. I'm originally from Leeds in the UK. I did my undergrad at Newcastle University in European politics, and then I went into business, and I was working alongside lawyers every day. And I was like, this kind of looks fun. Maybe I should be a lawyer. So, you know, on a whim, after a few glasses of wine one night, I applied to law school, and I applied to do the Gdl program. And lo and behold, 2 weeks later, I handed in my notice and I started at law school. That's not normal. This is going back a few years. So I did the Gdl program. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's basically where you do a non-law undergraduate, and then you basically cram 3 years of the law undergrad into 1 year. So I did that program. Whilst I was doing it, I successfully obtained a training contract in the UK with one of the top 50 full-service law firms in the UK. They then sponsored me to go to LPP and the Leeds branch, to go to BPP, and do my PLC or whatever it's called, LPC. I qualified from there, did my training contract in the UK, got called to the bar in England and Wales in 2009 in the middle of a global recession. I'd always known I wanted to do corporate law. There wasn't a position for me. So I took a mini sabbatical, and that's when I moved to Canada. I was supposed to be here for one ski season, to do a ski season. It was something I'd always wanted to do. I've now officially been here 11 years. So I really do enjoy Canada. I loved my opportunity to come here. I ended up staying, as you can tell. I ultimately moved to Vancouver. I started the NCA process, and I was working for a national law firm as a legal assistant. This was after getting many temping positions. And then I ultimately then found an articling position with a boutique firm, O'Neill Law, and I completed my articles, and I was called to the bar in BC in 2018, and I've been working with them ever since. So I do cross-border corporate, commercial, and securities work.
Thank you for that. And Siobhan, is the type of work you do today similar to what you were doing in the UK, or is it vastly different?
Great question. Actually, it's fairly similar. I was really fortunate with the law firm that I worked with in the UK. I got to do a variety of corporate commercial work. We also did several go publics and listings on various different stock exchanges. So it actually came in really handy that now I work doing that full time. But now I do it typically with emerging markets and startups. Okay,
wonderful. And Sharen, did you find some of your experience in practice, in medical malpractice, any of that experience you bring to BASF?
Yeah, definitely. I think that as legal professionals, you know, you really do use your training, even though you practice in a different area of law. You know, when you have to transition, the practice methods, you'll realize when you actually get to apply yourself, isn't that much different. And I do believe that, you really have to use the training that you had before, and just apply yourself with common sense, with integrity. You'll be able to transfer a lot of those skills to the area of work that you're working on right now. So even though, I used to practice in medical malpractice, a lot of that experience in civil litigation was brought over because currently in my new role, I actively manage the litigation as well. So, and because I came from a Commonwealth jurisdiction, there really wasn't much difference. Procedures are more or less the same. At least on principle, it's very much the same. And so it's not difficult to navigate, really.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you for that. Ugo, would you like to go next? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Ugo Mackenzie. Thank you for having me here, Liran. I basically moved from Nigeria to Canada a couple of years back, 5 years ago, for a Master's of Law. I first arrived at Dalhousie University in Halifax, and once I was done with that, I decided that I wanted to move to Toronto just for other career opportunities, which I did last year. I qualified to, I became a qualified lawyer in Canada, Ontario, last 2 months ago, August. I articled with a firm, OP Law, where we do labor, employment, human rights law, and I was eventually hired back on as an associate. So I do work with them for now. I've enjoyed my practice with them. I do like Canada too; it's very welcoming. The legal profession, on the other hand, is something to be. It's something we have to talk about for sure. And that's all about me.
Yeah. Can you tell us some of the work you do with the Ontario Bar Association and the Canadian Bar Association? Because you're very actively involved, and I think that for internationally trained lawyers or people that are coming from abroad, I think it's a great opportunity to get involved. So perhaps you can speak a little bit about that.
Yes, I can for sure. So I work with the OB right now, the OBA, and I am a council member. What we do basically is we do a couple of research. So we have different committees, and we have the policy committee, we have the diversity committee. As a matter of fact, I just got appointed to the diversity committee, and it's just basically what we do is we look at the profession and see where diversity is an issue. We bring it back to the OBA, and we try as much as possible to send out educative and educational materials to other lawyers, basically saying, talking about why diversity is important and why there should be a diverse team in a law firm. I do strongly advise that as an internationally trained lawyer. At least for myself, it was very helpful to join the OBA and the CBA. I was able to network and connect with people. When I moved to Canada, I had no friends and I had no family. I knew no one. And then I also moved again to Toronto, where I had no friends and no family. What I basically did was join the OBA, which allowed me to connect with colleagues and make new friends, and basically gave me the opportunity to network and to run in the OBA elections. So I would say overall my experience in Toronto as a legal professional has been through the OBA. So it is quite advisable that you join the OBA or the CBA and try to be as active as you can. It would also help you when you begin to look for articles.
Thanks for that. Thank you. Lua, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
First of all, thank you, Liran, for putting this session together, and for all the listeners who are tuning in to listen to us and our experiences, our international experience and the experience of relicensing in Canada. When people tell me, oh, where are you from? Tell us your story, how you got to Canada. I always tell them I consider myself to be a citizen of the world. The reason being is I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia, but I have Persian, Middle Eastern, and African blood in me. So I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia, and then once I finished high school, I moved to South Africa, and I obtained my LLB degree at Nelson Mandela University in Port Elizabeth. And I stayed in South Africa until I decided to immigrate to Canada. And I obtained my South African bar exam qualification, and I trained within a firm in Johannesburg, Rendera and Associates. And then they took me on as an associate. And while I was articling, I was exposed to many areas of the law because it was a general practice. And once I became an associate, I saw that there was an opportunity for me to do estate planning and estate administration, and we didn't have that department in our firm. So I spoke to the partners and I assisted the firm in setting up the Wills, Estates and Trust Department. So for the next 5 years that I was with Render & Associates, I was handling all the estate administration, estate planning, and assisting clients with their estate planning. And I went on to get my conveyancing qualification. In South Africa, if you want to do real estate transfer, you have to write another exam. So I did that. And the reason why I did that is because I wanted to give the clients the full service package. So I would administer the estate, do the transfer, so we didn't have to outsource the work. And then I decided to immigrate to Canada, and I landed in Canada January 2018. And it took me 2 years to for the whole relicensing process. So basically write the 8 NCA exams that were assigned to me, do 10 months of articling, and I was qualified in Ontario this year, January 2020. So it took me 2 years from when I landed to get my, to be licensed in Ontario. And I was lucky enough to be able to find an articling position right after I finished the NCA exams with a very prestigious firm in Toronto that specializes in estate litigation. So I was lucky to practice in the same area that I was practicing in South Africa. Although I was doing mostly solicitor's work in South Africa, mainly administering estates and estate planning, in Toronto, I practice only does estate litigation. So I'm mainly doing barrister's work. So it's been interesting. It's been challenging. It's been a whole new learning experience, and I'm enjoying every minute of it.
Wow, that sounds very, very cool, your story. How did you get the idea to start or to go to your employer and say, hey, we need to start up this new area of practice? I mean, first of all, how did you get the courage? And then how did you get the idea as well? Because that's pretty bold.
So we used to outsource the work to another lawyer because we didn't have in-house counsel to do it. And that lawyer moved away. So we lost all the estate planning work that we had. So that's where I saw the opportunity that I can do this. I was passionate about this area of the law. And I went and I spoke to the partners. I was lucky enough that I had a very good working relationship with the partners. They could see that I was hardworking. My head was in the game, as they say. And they listened to my idea. They really liked it. It was good for me. It was good for them. And I assisted them to establish the department. And it took time, but it was quite successful.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's incredible. It's bold. It's great. I think it's something other people should consider because, sometimes, especially now, I know that a lot of people are losing jobs or some firms are cutting back, and perhaps you can think of new areas or creating value for firms that didn't exist before. So it's a great story. Thank you. So for the people who are watching, you're welcome to participate, of course, and ask our panelists questions. They're here for that. So please use the comments section, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. Please use the comment section to ask these people questions because that's why they're here. I'd like to, while we wait for questions to pour in, because I think they're going to pour in, I'd like to move to another area of discussion, and that is perhaps this perception people have of internationally trained lawyers. Canada is a very welcoming country when it comes to immigration. We have very generous immigration laws, and we welcome immigrants. And I think the government's just announced recently that they're going to be extending and creating different programs now to accept more immigrants into this country. And yet some internationally trained lawyers have a different experience when it comes to dealing with the legal profession, perhaps not as welcoming as Canada as a whole is. So my question to the panel is, have any of you experienced these types of challenges as somebody who's either from a foreign country or or the fact that you're just internationally trained? Have you experienced this before, or perhaps do you have other colleagues that might be internationally trained? And what were those experiences? It's kind of open to the panel, so in no particular order.
I can kick this off if you'd like.
Siobhan. I know Siobhan's had a lot of discussions with different ITLs, just from her work with Global Lawyers of Canada. So I'm sure you have a lot to contribute, please.
Sure. So, it is challenging, but there are, like with any industry that you work in and with any people that you come into contact with, there are some people who are going to be supportive, and there are some people who are not going to be as supportive and maybe make your life a lot more difficult. And that is the reality. But I've also seen some really great stories from people. So in my role as the president of the BC chapter of Global Lawyers of Canada, I've had many, many discussions with ITLs across the country and also around the world who are looking at emigrating to Canada, or they've actually been in Canada and have moved on elsewhere. So they've shared their stories of being in different parts of the world and what it's like to practice there when you're coming from a different location. And today alone, I was on a Facebook group and somebody had posted a comment talking about the challenges that they'd found. In particular, there was an advert that they keep seeing adverts being posted where they specifically say you must have attended an Ontario educational institution, or you must have gone to XYZ university. And they said, this is like another hurdle of barrier to entry into the legal profession, on top of there being far more applicants than there are actual positions available at the moment, with an economy that is in limbo right now, as much of the world is. And so it's just another barrier to entry that's being put in place for immigrants in particular, and for internationally trained lawyers. And this started a very heated discussion in the Facebook group. And some of you watching may have been in this Facebook group because it's a very popular Facebook group for lawyers in particular who are looking for new positions or are new to the legal profession. And it was quite interesting to see the diverse viewpoints that were coming up in that discussion, where there were those who have found continued barriers to entry, whether they were immigrants or they're Canadians and maybe they're coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds, or they have a name that looks a little bit different and it's not obvious how to pronounce it. And then there were those who were like, well, that's kind of normal and that's how it's done around the world. Just suck it up. Just apply anyway. So it was quite interesting to see the different ways that people approached the issue. And some were saying, well, this is discriminatory. Some were saying this is a human rights violation. Other people were just saying this is just practice. Other people were like, just ignore it and apply anyway. So it was quite an interesting timing of this conversation to come up, given what we're talking about today. But some of the positives that I was also seeing in the comments were people saying, I've seen those advertisements, I've applied for them, and I've got the position. because I was the best candidate with the best experience. And they could see my experience from the way that I portrayed it in my cover letter and my resume. Or I reached out to the firm personally and spoke to somebody on the hiring committee. And I was able to talk to them about my experience and show how I could add value to the firm and to their clients. So although there are these inherent barriers that are put in place, there's also some ways that you can get creative to show how you can add value to the situation and to the firm. But it really does come down to you as an individual showing that you are that sparkly, magical unicorn that that firm or business needs, and that you can add value, and that you can explain your experience and how it relates to them and to what they're looking for. Because yes, you're not going to have, for example, you went to U of T and you have a grade point average of 4.6 or whatever it is, if you're an internationally trained lawyer. So you need to spend a little bit more time explaining your background and showcasing why you're the best person for the job.
Yeah, thank you for that point. I'm wondering, where do you think this is coming from? Do you think it's like a protectionist point of view? We're worried about people coming in and taking our jobs. Why do you think there is this negative view towards internationally trained lawyers?
Would you like me to answer that, or would you like someone else to go for it? I'm going to let someone else go for it, because I know Sharon's itching to answer that question.
Well, I definitely do think that there is, in my view, it would be, a measure of discrimination against internationally qualified lawyers in the legal profession in Canada. And it really may be that, there is a protection, right? Protection of jobs being taken away from Canadian law graduates, because they have so much, it's so competitive for them alone to get these articling positions. And then you have foreign qualified lawyers coming in. Just from experience, this landscape was really very different to what I was used to in Hong Kong, where I was always surrounded by colleagues and peers who went to law schools and qualified in countries all around the world. And the only barrier for these lawyers locally was that they couldn't represent a client in court, in the local courts. Otherwise, they were able to advise on deals, on transactions, in commercial context. So, it really is quite interesting in Canada how there seems to be a misconception that lawyers have to graduate from a Canadian law school in order to be able to do the work of a Canadian lawyer, which is really not true. And like I mentioned before, a lot of the skills that you are trained in as a lawyer can be transitioned quite smoothly into a new role when you get to apply yourself. So I definitely wouldn't be. I agree. We must not be sort of discouraged from applying to these positions. Sometimes even regardless of what their so-called requirements are for making it through. Because what I've seen actually in the Canadian workplace now is that a lot of companies, national firms, international firms in Canada, a lot of companies are open to hiring internationally trained lawyers, so long as they have the relevant experience, right? I certainly know of a national conglomerate that's had for many years and a foreign qualified lawyer as their general counsel. And he's been in that position for many years, and he's only really recently qualified as a Canadian lawyer. So, and there's also the opportunity once you are in that workplace. Say, for example, I do a lot of D&I work in our company, and whenever there is an opportunity, we do have to voice that concern that NCA students have, or that those experiences that NCA students have, so that there is an awareness of this kind of negative experience that NCA students are having, and hopefully it'll open up the doors for more foreign trained lawyers. But it's it's unfortunately is a barrier, but I really don't think that we should be discouraged by it, because I think that there are enough NCA students out there who are working as Canadian lawyers, who haven't been able to prove themselves in the workplace to be able to contribute as a Canadian lawyer, and to be able to get the job done. So definitely don't be discouraged.
Thanks for that. Sorry, I'm just working with this mute button. Perhaps we've got some questions here on the side that have come through, and maybe it's a good time that we can tackle some of these questions. Catherine asked a specific question to Lua. She says, what kind of work do outsourced lawyers do? It seems novel, and she was just curious about it. Because I think you mentioned that in the firm you worked at, they were outsourcing a lot of the estate work.
So this is back in South Africa, where we would, when I say outsource the work, as in we had a lawyer who had her own firm, and our firm had partnered up with this lawyer specifically to just do estate-related matters. So if we got a client and they needed estate-related work done, we would refer the work to the lawyer, and then our firm would get a referral fee. So both lawyers are helping each other out. So that's what I meant by outsourcing it. Our firm wouldn't specifically do it. We would hand it over to another firm and that's as a referral. But there was a partnership agreement.
That's quite common, and even within in-house counsel positions, much of the work, well, depending on the size of the company and whether there's an actual in-house team or not, or just one individual who's stick handling all of the work, they'll often outsource much of the work to outside counsel or other firms that specialize in those areas. Thank you for that question. We've got another one here from Steve. Steve asks whether it would be advisable to pursue, for an international lawyer to pursue a GP LLM from the University of Toronto, or go through the NCA process for qualification certificate. I think I can speak to this question. And I think the answer is it depends. Right? It really depends what your goals are by doing an LLM. What are you trying to accomplish? If you're going to do an LLM because you believe it'll open the doors to jobs and opportunities, or perhaps to on-campus interviews and things like that, I'm not sure that's the best route for you. And I speak from personal experience. I'm a graduate at the University of Toronto. I did my LLM there. I was not in the GP LLM program. I went into the regular business law stream. But I was also the president of the Graduate Students Association, and so I sat on faculty council, and I had meetings with the faculty, and we spoke regularly about this. And one of the things I fought for was for LLM students who were not necessarily internationally trained, they were just LLM students, to have access to the on-campus interviews. They would not allow us to do so. And I know that that's the same in other universities as well, in other law schools. The JD students are the little, the golden egg, and they've got to put all their resources to making sure that the number of JD graduates have articling positions. I think one of the metrics, that they use to compare law schools is how many graduates have articling positions after they complete their JD. That's not the case for LLM students. So the priority, of course, is their JD students. And so if the reason you want to do an LLM is because you want access to career services within the law school, there may be some career services, very limited though, and you are not the focus, in my opinion. But it could be different now, and that was many years ago. But I'm still hearing the same thing coming out of those schools. So if you're somebody that likes structure, perhaps, and you want to, you want to sit in classes and courses and stuff like that rather than do the NCA, which is self-taught, then you can take an LLM. But the costs really have to outweigh the benefits, and the costs of some of these programs are high. They're at least 4 times higher than a normal LLM, which is somewhere in the range of $10,000, and the GP LLM, I don't know the exact cost, but I believe it's 35,000 plus, whatever those costs are. And the other thing you might want to think about, and again, this is only my opinion, I'm one person on this panel, some of you may have a different view, is that, for example, if you go to the Osgood LLM, Common Law LLM program, you are doing an LLM, which is a Master of Laws degree in first-year law courses. And so, is that something you want to do, or perhaps you want to specialize in some area of law, which I don't think you're going to have a specialization other than common law, whatever that means. So you're going to specialize in common law courses. I did do an LLM, and I did apply to the University of Toronto, but I did it after I was already a barrister and solicitor in Ontario. And I did it for reasons of, I was interested in going into academia. I was interested in learning how to research and write papers. And I thought this would open the door, and it made sense because I was already in education, and that's something I was doing, so it made sense for me. At U of T, at least for their LLM program, I'm not talking about the GP LLM right now, which is the global professional program, just the LLM. It is seen as a stepping stone into doing a doctoral degree in law. So it's supposed to prepare you for the SJD, which is a doctorate of law, or a PhD if you want to do a PhD in law. So that's the view there. I hope that answers your question. If anyone else has a different view on whether you should, do the LLM stream instead of the NCA stream, please chime in. Yeah, Siobhan.
I also think you need to look at the requirements that the FLSC send to you. So when you send in all of your paperwork and they assess your credentials, it may be a requirement that you need to go to a Canadian university or a Canadian accredited university and undertake in-class tuition. And if that's the case, then an LLM may be the right route for you. That might be a good way for you to meet those requirements and also come out with almost the rubber stamp, the seal of having a Canadian university on your resume at the same time. And so there are benefits to having an LLM, but it really is a very personal decision. I didn't do one. I don't think the majority of us on this panel did one. We all decided to self-study or use a tutor service to help us. So I think it really does come down to your individual circumstances with time, with money, and your requirements. But if you are wanting to specialize, as Liran said, for example, if you want to do tax or intellectual property law, there are universities across the country that offer LLM programs in those specialties, and that may be a requirement to work in those areas. or it may give you a boost to get into one of those positions later on. So I think it really comes down to you thinking about all the different criteria for you in your situation and doing what fits for you, and don't worry about everybody else. Do what's right for you right now in your situation.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's a great piece of advice. I think we'll move on to the next question from Olufunk. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the question is, please, may I get advice on the best approach to secure articles with a national firm as an internationally trained lawyer? I want an article in Calgary. I think Ugo is a great role model, an example of some of the things you should be doing because of how active she is. Siobhan as well, you guys are super active in networking in the community. So I think this is just a general question on networking perhaps. And Ugo's touched on some of the things, but do you guys have any other advice? Yeah, Ugo.
Yeah, I'm going to say network as much as you can. Again, join the OBA. As an internationally trained lawyer, you can join the OBA for free for at least a year. So you get to meet other colleagues, and these are people who are in firms already and in positions to give you employment. And if they cannot give you employment, then they can connect you with your friends and other colleagues as well. One thing I found that has worked for me, I know a lot of people are not big on cold calling firms. I am not too, but I'm very big on email calling firms, like cold email firms. Basically, send a message to law firms and just say who you are, attach your cover letter, your resume, and basically explain your qualifications as much as you can, and just ask them if they have time to meet with you for tea or coffee, even if they have nothing to offer you employment-wise at the moment. It's always good to connect in that way, because then you get your name out there. Another thing to do is to connect with people on LinkedIn. Basically find ways in which you can connect with them through education or the school you went to, or if you're Nigerian or you're Canadian or from the UK, whatever way you can connect with people, because I realize that people like to talk about themselves, they like to connect. So do that, send them an email or a message on LinkedIn, say, I just want to chat with you. I see you do this. That's very interesting. Just don't make it all about, can you hire me? Give me a job. Just make it about, I want to connect. Let's be friends. Let's discuss. Let's see where our relationship and our conversations will take us to. But that's how I found articling when I moved to Toronto. I moved here. In the year I moved here, it took me 3 months to find articling, but it was very difficult. I was calling law firms every time. I was setting ticklers. I was setting alarms to remind me to send forward documents and information. You have to be proactive in finding a place to article. You can't just send in an application and just hope for the best, call, message, and kind of go from there.
Just wanted to chime in as well on that point. I don't know what the rest of the panel feels about this, but please let us know. But from my experience in networking, also, I also came across a lot of sole practitioners or smaller firms who are open to outsourcing work to students, right? To any of their research work or any of their sort of small tasks that they might have to do in the firm, and so when you're writing to these firms, one option really could also be to actually offer assistance, right? Not be afraid to try to find that opportunity to work, and that just adds also to your resume. It builds on what you have already, and it might be beneficial as well. So I would suggest offering what your skill set and telling them that, hey, I can actually help you out. And early in my when I first arrived, I was networking because of my background in medical malpractice. I was networking with a lot of medical malpractice firms and lawyers, and that I actually got the opportunity to work, do a bit of research work for a medical malpractice lawyer locally, and it was a good experience. But obviously, eventually, I through networking, I then got the opportunity to join BASF as a corporate commercial in a corporate commercial role. So, but I wouldn't disregard, what I had, the opportunity that I had with this local firm, because it gave me an insight into how the courts worked, or how what's expected of me as a lawyer, as a Canadian lawyer as well. So.
I would also add in that if you're specifically looking at national firms, you're looking at the large firms, if you're looking at national ones. And the national firms have fairly strict hiring procedures that they follow. And if you don't summer with them, then you have a very, very slim chance of getting an articling position, because they typically hire back all of their summer interns into articling positions, and then they may only have 1 or 0 positions available for the articling round. So if you are looking at these national firms, they are incredibly competitive because they advertise nationally. They go through the process, which I'm sure you're all aware of, with VI Desktop. So it's easily accessible for everybody, which makes them even more competitive with people. So if you do want a national firm, if that's what you're looking for, then you need to be applying for the summer process, and you just have to accept that it's going to be a longer process. But as the other panelists have said, don't discount other opportunities. There are some great firms out there who do fantastic work who are not national firms and may not be in that hiring process. I, for example, was a legal assistant with a national firm, but couldn't fit into the summer articling hiring process, because in BC there are very specific rules about who can apply for a summer articling position, and a lot of NCA candidates don't fit into those requirements the way the rules are currently written. So I actually ended up articling with a boutique firm, and I got that position through networking with business connections that I was creating and cultivating over time. So not even networking with lawyers, I was networking with non-legal professionals who then actually introduced me to their lawyers. And they didn't hire for that position. They just happened to know that they had a lot of work going on at that law firm, and they thought maybe I could help them out. So you definitely need to start building that network as soon as possible. Don't wait until you've completed your NCA requirements. You need to be doing it parallel with the NCA requirements, so that you're not then sitting there starting that process at the end.
Thank you, Siobhan. If I can move the conversation back to diversity, which is the topic of today's discussion, there is a question here from Afsal. He asks, Ugo, does the CBA develop EDI mandates for provincial law societies? And if so, what are some of its current initiatives in this regard? I don't know if you have the answer to that, Ugo,
I do know that it's the law societies who deal with the EDIs and not the Canadian Bar Association. The association is, I wouldn't use the word just, but the association is what it is, an association, and EDIs are mandated or regulated by the law societies of the different provinces.
Okay, perhaps we'll move on to the last segment here, or the last part that I wanted to speak about. We have about 10 minutes remaining. And really that's, what are some of the ways we can move forward and improve the situation, perhaps make the legal profession more welcoming to immigrant lawyers or internationally trained lawyers, I haven't thought of any ideas in advance, but it's just an open conversation. So even for the viewers, you can put in the comment section some suggestions or ideas. Does anyone have any ideas of things you can recommend? How do we make the profession more welcoming? How do we start breaking down those barriers so that highly skilled, internationally trained lawyers are welcomed here, and they don't feel like they're climbing mountains, just to get into the profession?
I think one way would be, you were just speaking about it for a few minutes ago, Liran, about internationally trained lawyers not being allowed on the on-campus interviews. I think that would be a great start. I have a master's of law from Gdl, and after my master's, I found it difficult to find articling. I had to speak with the career department and actually say, you need to get me on the OCIs, because that's where I can get the opportunity to meet potential employers who would interview me and potentially give me a job. So I do think one thing we can start to do with the Law Society and OBA, and I have been speaking with the OBA a little bit about this, is trying to send out information to internationally trained lawyers as well during the OCI process, and just to include us in that process. It makes it a lot easier. One experience I had though was, even though I attended the OCIs, I realized that I was just there to fill the quota per se, and I wasn't really being considered. So that's probably another challenge that we would have to overcome. But I think that the first step, and I think a good step, would be for internationally trained lawyers to have the opportunity to meet potential employers at the OCIs.
I think that's a great point. But even as Siobhan pointed out, that there is this hiring cycle which really starts within first year law school, and that is, you need to get a summer position right after first year law school or your second year of law school, and then the summer students are the ones that are in the pool for those articling positions. And once you're out of that cycle, it makes it challenging. But I hear your point, and perhaps law schools could do more as well. At least those that are offering LLM programs, because those LLM programs do have internationally trained candidates, and they should be including internationally trained lawyers. Now, I know that there are some organizations, maybe Siobhan has some information, there are some NCA organizations that work on bringing on-campus interviews to internationally trained lawyers. Siobhan, do you have any info on that?
Yeah, so for anyone who's watching, and if you're looking at Ontario, the NCA network in Ontario actually hold their own round of OCIs. They actually had a session, I want to say it was last night, but if you go to the NCA network, they're on every social media channel out there. Look them up. They do a really, really good job of connecting the ITL community in Ontario with the OCI schedule and the opportunities, and giving you access to law firms ahead of the process, and also talking you through what to expect for the OCI process. Now, at the moment, that's only in Ontario. It would be nice to see that spread out across into other provinces, but it doesn't exist at the moment. But the other way is to tap into various different organizations. So Ugo did a really good job of highlighting the OBA. But obviously, if you're not in Ontario, you can't join the OBA, in the same way with the Trial Lawyers Association in Toronto. But there are similar organizations in every single province and territory. So depending on where you're looking at, make sure you get in contact with those organizations and see what opportunities they have going. And so, for example, the CBA has the Young Lawyers section. It's a really good way to connect with articling students, junior associates in various different firms, and then also partners who are attending those section meetings and potentially telling you about opportunities that are coming up. But I think apart from the OCI process, I think one of the big things is changing the narrative around ITLs. And it used to be, and for many people it still is, that the reason that Canadians go and study abroad is because they weren't smart enough to get into a Canadian university. And I think that mindset has tarnished internationally trained lawyers as a whole, and that's not actually the case. Many Canadian students have gone abroad because of the opportunities for going abroad. They wanted that experience of studying outside of Canada. They wanted that global mindset that comes from going to a new place. And also sometimes it may be cheaper to go and study abroad. And then for those immigrants who are moving from different jurisdictions into Canada, you guys have so much experience. We all have so much experience that we've gained from the different places we've been. And Sharen and Liran and Ugo have all said this before. Your skills are all transferable, but it's about you having to demonstrate how they're transferable, because many of the people who are in the hiring positions have not come into contact with internationally trained lawyers. They've not come into lawyers from different jurisdictions before. And their perception of law in different jurisdictions is probably what they've seen on the TV. Similar to how the majority of us think that American lawyers, it's exactly like Suits or Law and Order. Now, we all know in reality that's not what law is like. Very few of us work in Pearson Spector Lit and wear designer suits. So I think it's a matter of like us as a community showcasing our transferable skills, and also those of us who've already gone through the process and are actively working in the legal community, reaching a hand down and lifting up the next group of people coming through, and being those allies for them.
I think that's a wonderful point. If you're in a position where you can help other internationally trained lawyers, use that to your advantage. And perhaps that goes back to Ugo's point about networking, using LinkedIn to find connections with other internationally trained lawyers. So if you come from Nigeria, try and find a lawyer who's originally from Nigeria and is already working in a firm. They may be more open to assisting you, and try and find those types of connections that could help break through the glass ceiling, if you will. Any other opinions?
One person shared with me their thoughts during this conversation that I alluded to earlier on the Facebook group, and they suggested an overhaul of the entire articling process, and that maybe the Law Society was responsible for allocating candidates to different law firms. So rather than it being every single law firm would just put up, if they were, they would speak to their network and say, hey, you know what, we're looking for an articling student, who do you know? All those positions would go through a different department, a specific department at the Law Society, and then all the different candidates would then be able to apply for those positions. I thought that was an interesting idea. I don't know practically how that would work, but it's one that definitely people could consider, as we are a self-regulated profession, that maybe that's something where the Law Society has to get a bit more involved and highlight the positions that are available and make them more readily advertised.
Well, we've got one more question on the topic here. From Daniel Lippman, he says, do you think eliminating articling would help level the playing field so that there is no barrier to becoming a lawyer other than the bar exam? Also, and unrelated, how should small firms advertise to look for internationally trained lawyers or those with more life experience so we aren't just getting traditional law school applicants? Let's break that down into two questions. I think perhaps Ontario has toyed with this idea of getting rid of articling, or at least introducing a second path, and that is through the LPP, which is at Ryerson. Ultimately, the Law Society decided to get rid of that program, and there was a lot of backlash, and they've extended its life for a few more years. I don't know whether this project will continue, but I think that some of the statistics that were released in the there was a report written by the Law Society, and I don't remember the name of the report, but the statistics seem to be, at least anecdotally from what I know as well, from people talking to me, is that a lot of internationally trained lawyers are ending up in the LPP program and not in the articling stream, and as well as the bottom, percentage of Canadian law grads who don't get articles, whether it's 10 to 15% of those grads that are not getting articles are going into the LPP program. And the fear was that it's creating a two-tier system in getting licensed. And so perhaps having two different streams, and I know that's not exactly your question. Your question is, let's just get rid of articling altogether, and I assume that we'd be getting rid of the LPP as well. Perhaps that is a way. I really don't think it's good to have a two-tier system personally, because I think it's created a two-tier system. And I think we see a difference between people in the LPP program and the articling program. And I think the LPP program is fantastic, by the way. I've heard so many great things about it. Perhaps making the LPP mandatory for everyone would be a good thing, and just get rid of articles altogether. But it's different in every single province, and it's up to the province to decide. So I don't know whether every single province suffers the same articling shortage that Ontario and BC does. I'm not sure. Anyone else have thoughts on this? Siobhan, yeah.
I don't know about everybody else, but a key component of practicing in any jurisdiction is the experiential part. And I think if you look around the world, bar exams are different, and they've been implemented differently in different places, but the majority of places mandate an experiential part. And if you speak to most articling students, they find that they learn the most through the experiential part, the articling part, rather than just sitting a bar exam. So I don't know if it could be just scrapped, but maybe if it took a different format, or maybe if part of the law school requirement involved an equivalent experiential element, then they may be able to do away with the articling process. But that would require an overhaul of the entire legal education system as it currently stands, which doesn't mean it shouldn't be done just because it's a complete change, but it would require a big trickle-down effect through it. I know that in Alberta and Saskatchewan and a few other provinces, they've implemented what's called CPLED, and CPLED has a variety of courses that you take, and they're practicum based as well, and you do that alongside your articling process, so that then everybody, the idea is that by the end of the articling process, you're all on even field. So maybe that would get away from the fact that you just spend your whole time articling, making coffee and photocopying.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for taking the time to post your questions, for watching. If you are joining us for CPD credit, please make sure that you've filled out the registration form that was posted in the link, so that we do have your names. We hope you join us again on November 16th and November 23rd. Any lawyers out there that are watching or interested in taking part in a similar type of panel, where we discuss the value of diversity, we discuss different solutions that we can come up with, please do email us. You can email our office at info@lexpd.ca. Again, that's info@lexpd.ca. Thank you, Siobhan, Lua, Sharen, Ugo. Thank you so much for joining the panel, and I hope that you will perhaps join some future panels as well. And I hope to host more of these sessions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.